Oops. Oh. Okay. All right. That was weird. Anyway, good morning, everyone. Welcome to CCLI. I trust we don't know what to call that anymore because it's not the first service because they go at the same time. But either way, hope that went well. We had a good time here in Dwell. And I'm excited to announce our CCLI speakers for the morning. I'm going to start with Dr. Rich Ray, who's right there. He's got the waving a pad. Dr. Richard Ray is the Provost Emeritus and Professor of Kinesiology at Hope College. He served as, I trust this is true, he served as the college's Chief Academic Officer, Dean for Social Sciences, Head Athletic Trainer. He is a member of both the Michigan Athletic Trainer Society and the National Athletic Trainer Society Halls of Fame, and also the co-chair of the Hope Western Prison Educational Program. Our other presenter this morning is Dr. David Stubbs. He is the professor of ethics and theology at Western Theological Seminary, has degrees from Princeton and Duke. I don't know if we should say that or not, but probably. That's probably okay. He is also an ordained minister in the PCUSA. And in some ways, he is responsible for my being here. And I'll tell you why just briefly. In seminary, I went to Western Seminary, didn't really anticipate staying in the Reformed Church in America. I thought I was so cool and hip and on the cutting edge of things that I was going to go non-denominational. And then taking an elective with Dr. Stubbs, I took Reformed theologies, and I said, oh, it's not quite as staunch as some people make it out to be. There's actually quite a vast array of what being Reformed means. And so that was inspiring. And so I then took all of my classes exams my senior year since I had put those off. In addition, I was a guest of Dr. Stubbs at the Dow Center to play my first day of noon ball, which is where we play basketball, which without which I probably wouldn't be in ministry either because I would have gone crazy. And so that is my outlet. In so many ways, Dr. David Stubbs also is one of the reasons that I am here. So they're here this morning to present on their program, the Hope Western Prison Educational Program, and I'm excited to hear more about it. And I'll turn it over to them.
Thanks, David. It's a pleasure to be back with you. I don't know of how many of you were here for the first time that we came a while ago. Great. And so it's wonderful to be with you again and to kind of give you both some basic background to our Hope Western Prison Education Program as well as an update on what's going on, because we're at a very exciting season within the program where we're able to get things going. So I'm going to start off our presentation and give you some of the background about what the Hope Western Prison Education Program is, and then we'll kind of move into telling you exactly what's going on right now. All right. So before we get to our, I guess you could say, to the solution, let me talk about the problem a little bit and what's going on in our larger society that would call for something like the Hope Western Prison Education Program. I don't know if you can read that very well. It's kind of small. But there's some problems within our prison system. And I think this is widely recognized within our country as well. I guess the first thing, I just want to start that there's many lives are wasted. We meet some men who are in there, and they are in prison for their whole lives. And perhaps some should be, perhaps some should not be, but no matter what, their whole life, you know, they get in when they're in 15 or 16 years old, and we're meeting them now when they're 50 years old, and they've been behind razor wire for their entire lives. It's just wasted lives, and that's a problem. Prisons are also part of vicious circles of inequality in our society. Both with race income and educational income equality. You find that there's a lot of, within certain racial backgrounds, I mean, we'll talk about that a little bit more, but there's, there's just some inequities where a large percentage of adult black men spend time in prison. And because of that, it creates a sort of cycle that goes through the generations and creates just problems from generation to generation. You end up people who keep on entering prison that are part of larger families and larger cultures. Also income. You find that the vast majority of people who are behind bars have low income, and they certainly don't make any money when they're in prison, and when they get out. And there's some problems with that. There's income inequality, and it creates certain kind of cycles of incarceration within larger families and cultures, as well as educational inequality. It's when you find that when people receive education, they usually don't end up in prison. And this raises the question, it's like, well, maybe education is part of the answer for people to be able to provide opportunities for them so they don't turn to some of the kind of behaviors that would cause them to go into prison. And so there's some cycles, vicious cycles of inequality within our society. Also, prisons are very expensive. Looking at the other side, do you realize that 20% of our Michigan state budget goes toward keeping people incarcerated? It's 1 out of every 5 of our tax dollars goes to that. You think, that is, I know, it just, when I found that the first time, that was something that just kind of blew my mind. And the Department of Corrections, 20% of our state budget. There's, this is of course inexact, 38,678 people in state prison. Those will eventually be our potential students. So sometime in January or February, we're going to be sending out some information to all the people in state prison and all the men in state prison, because it's a men-only prison where we're operating. But we were able to draw from those 38,000. But each prisoner of those 38,000 costs about $36,000 a year to keep them incarcerated. So it's a huge financial burden on society as well. And our correction system is not very effective. We operate in the Muskegon Correctional Facility, and there's some good stories to be told about what's going on in prisons in Michigan, so don't get me wrong here. But overall, 5 and 6 state prisoners, 83% released in 2005 across 30 states, are arrested at least once during the 9 years following their release. So when you get into prison and you come out, most of the time, people end up going back into prison. And so it becomes this kind of revolving door. So there's some problems with our larger system. Here's a little bit more about inequality and incarceration. Prisoners of color are 5 times more prevalent than white people in prison. And look at this, 1 out of every 10 black men in his 30s is in prison or jail on any given day. That's just astounding, isn't it? When you think about this larger population and what's going on within our African American communities. It's like 1 out of 10 of people in their 30s, this time where they should be raising families, at the height of their powers for contributing to our society. 1 out of 10 are in prison at any particular day. And prisoners lag significantly in educational attainment, and prisoners go into prison poor, remain poor while in prison, and come out of prison poor. So it's there's some problems. Part of the solution is what we're about. And it's a Christian liberal arts education. Is simply locking up people the wisest way to respond to the wounds that crime creates. Not denying that there's some significant problems, right, when people are in this kind of situation. But what is the best way to respond? Well, a Christian liberal arts education can transform people through education and through the renewal of their minds and hearts. We've been in a pilot program for about 2.5 years, and we'll be telling you stories just very soon. But it's really amazing just what even one class with these gentlemen, the change that we see in their hearts and their minds and what's going on. It's really remarkable for them to be given a kind of opportunity that they've never had in their lives, and they are hungry. They are hungry for a certain kind of education as well. And it can benefit everyone: incarcerated students, their families, victims of crimes, our Michigan community, Hope College and Western Seminary. It's not only they who are benefiting from a program like this, but it's really amazing the kind of transformation that takes place within professors and within our teaching assistants when they go in there too. It's as well as the larger prison culture. So we see us as part of the solution. And so here's our mission. This is what we're about. There are 4 bullet points. We want to extend Hope College and Western Theological Seminary's mission to those living in incarcerated environments. In some ways, we're just expanding our campuses. And we're extending the same kind of offerings that we would give to people in downtown Holland, Michigan, to the men in the Muskegon Correctional Facility. And by this, we want to foster the transformation of the hearts and minds of prisoners and all involved in the program, thereby enlarging their imaginations for purposeful living as flourishing, beloved children of God, made in his image and likeness. For these men to begin to consider themselves as not simply problems or victims, but as actual contributors and as beloved children of God who have a mission in their lives is really quite remarkable, and that's what we're about. Number 3 is ease the burden to the community by reducing recidivism, lowering tax burdens associated with correction system, and improving the safety and culture for prisoners and prison staff. The statistics on educational programs in prison is quite remarkable. You give somebody a GED, or you get them any kind of college education, and recidivism drops precipitously, goes way down. And even the safety and the culture of prisons, you plop a little prison program like this in the middle of a larger prison, and it affects not only the people who are involved in that classroom, but the entire prison culture. The Calvin Prison Initiative has really taken us under their wing and been really wonderful for us in getting going. And I remember having a lunch. I was part of a luncheon with the warden at the prison in Ionia, where the Calvin program was going. And I remember that he was talking about just the number of violent incidents that took place in that prison from year to year. And after the Calvin program got in there, he actually had to double check. He couldn't believe the numbers. It had gone down from, I don't know if you remember this exactly, Rich, but it was something like 1,000 violent incidents a year, and this year it was 8. And he thought, there's got to be a mistake. And what's that? Yeah. So it's just kind of sort of amazing. And finally, the last bullet point is we really see this. I don't know if you noticed, but we live in somewhat of a divided society at this point. There's a lot of, okay. But bring together persons of goodwill from a variety of political, ideological, and theological perspectives. Republicans and Democrats can agree on programs like this. It's really wonderful to be part of something where you can get people from, for a variety of different reasons, from a variety of different perspectives that get behind a program like this. And so it's nice to be part of a program where we can bring together people of goodwill from all across different kinds of spectrums. All right, there's a little bit of that's our mission statement. You saw Matt Muskegon in the earlier picture. Here's a picture of President Felix Theonagraha. He's the president of Western Theological Seminary. We were able, it was just a really wonderful day. We were able to load up some buses with about, 120? Is it something like that? About 120 administrators from Hope and Western, take them up to Muskegon. And we had a day where they were able to meet our students, and our students gave presentations, and it was just a really wonderful day. And here's a photo from that day as well. So here's just one last slide about what kind of the big picture of what our program is about. So here's our program, is that we want to get these guys a Hope College bachelor degree in 4 years. And so we are right at the beginning, and they're now taking courses where they are getting Hope College credit, and they will earn a bachelor's degree in 4 years. So just like a typical student in Holland, Michigan. The major that they will have is called Faith, Leadership, and Service. So it's a major that we put together. And what this allows us to do is to draw from professors from the seminary quite a bit in their major. And then we draw from all the professors, whether it's geology or first-year writing or political science from Hope. And so we're able to offer all these guys a major called Faith, Leadership, and Service. We came up with that because one of the mission statements of Hope College is about preparing people for lives of leadership and service in the context of the Christian faith. So we thought this would be right at the very center of the missions of both Hope and Western. And what we want to do is every year we're going to bring in 20 students. And so there'll be four cohorts that are moving through this program. So when we're totally up and running, we're going to have a kind of a steady state of about 80 students who are going to be in the program. And again, we're drawing from, here it says 31,000, but it's probably about 36. It depends on how you figure out who's eligible for this. But again, we'll be able to draw from all the prisons in the state of Michigan. And we have an agreement with the Michigan Department of Corrections to where if somebody's accepted in the program, then they'll get transferred to the Muskegon Correctional Facility and be able to stay there for the length of the program. And Western Theological Seminary and Hope College professors are going to teach the courses, and we'll utilize WTS students as teaching assistants. We've had more seminary students in this program than we've had professors at this point. And so it's just going to be a wonderful thing for our seminary to get our students into prison. I guess that's maybe our new motto of our program, getting seminary students into prison. But it's a transformative experience for them as well as for our students. To have that kind of interaction is really wonderful. And not only do we want to do that, but we have something in the works. It's not been approved yet, but we're going to have a Western Theological Seminary certificate in restorative justice, or the restorative arts, which will hopefully see the light of day in about a year from now. And what that's going to be is we're going to get about 10-ish Western Seminary students, put them on a bus, go up to Muskegon, and take a class together with the guys in the same classroom. And that's going to, so they'll be taking different classes on restorative justice or nonviolent communication or different things that they might take at the seminary. And it's going to be a fabulous experience to have an integrated classroom, or sometimes people talk about it as an inside-out classroom. So you have inside students and outside students coming and sitting together and taking classes together. So that's kind of our vision of what we're doing. Here's and there's our cohort number 1. And these are the men in our first cohort. And well, let me turn it over to my compadre, Rich Ray. And yes, a question already. That's a common question we have. We ask that as well. What's interesting, and maybe Rich, you want to speak to this as well, but there's only one women's state prison in Michigan. So there's, and that is on the east side of the state. And so we looked into that, and it's also a complicated prison too. It's overcrowded, all sorts of different levels of security, and it'd be very difficult for our professors to travel all the way across the state. So we're going to let that, leave that to the University of Michigan, or somebody to do the program for the women's prison. But yeah, we were very concerned about that as well.
Thank you. Is this microphone I'm having on my ear, is that turned on yet? Yeah, there we go. Great. Okay. Thank you, David. What a wonderful partner I have in this work in David Stubbs. The best. Not represented here today is the sort of third leg of the stool, Pam Bush. Pam is a professor at Western Theological Seminary, and she is in charge of our co-curricular formation program. You know, getting a Christian liberal arts education is much more than simply taking classes. There's a whole person approach towards transforming someone for a life. And the fellows in prison need this just as much as the 18 to 22-year-olds need it. And so Pam is putting all of her significant skill and energy into this formation program, doing wonderful, wonderful work. Well, David told you that we had a kind of administrator's day at the prison. And let me tell you, in certain quarters, there was great rejoicing when people found out that all the administrators from the college and the seminary were in prison. But then we were able to get them out, and they came back, and they're back with us now. It really was quite a good day. We were here at Christ Memorial Church speaking to you and your fellow parishioners about 18 months ago. I think it was February, and I think the curtain on COVID went down in March. So it was right before, we all went away for 2 years. And COVID has been a significant challenge for us in being able to live into the timeline that we had for our prison education program. But God had a different timeline in mind, and he's taking care of things just fine. We've got some really good progress to announce to you today. During the pilot program, we were able to offer 6 non-credit courses. These were very challenging courses with really tough reading lists, and the men in the program did very, very well. These pilot courses allowed us to get a better handle on how well they read and think and write and speak and work together in groups and overcome obstacles in learning, and we discovered that they are very, very engaged students with lots of great stories to tell. There was about an 18 or 19-month period where we were not allowed to go into the prison because of COVID protocols. COVID, as inconvenient as it was to all of us, was like a burning scourge in prisons. Every single one of our students, except for one, caught COVID. Several were near death. And it was really, really a hard place to be during COVID. And so we weren't able to go in. We did send in a correspondence course, and they did great with that. And then we thought, well, what can we do else? And we sent in a couple of book studies. They read a novel called Mr. Ives Christmas, and another one called, it wasn't a novel, the second one, called The Warmth of Other Suns, about the great northern migration of African Americans from the south to the north. And these guys mostly are the children of that migration, and they didn't know anything about it. It was a very interesting thing for them to do. The big news is that we have effected an agreement with the Michigan Department of Corrections. Hope and Western Seminary, the presidents, have signed an agreement. It's a renewable 5-year agreement which allows us to go in and offer a bachelor's degree. And that was really the kickstarting of the transition from the pilot program to the degree granting phase of the program. And so we have launched that, and David is teaching his course, Faith Seeking Understanding. It's the first credit-bearing course, and the guys are doing great. They're really eating it up. We were able to go back into the prison for the very first time last week. And it's the first time we've seen these guys in a very, very long time. And I want to tell you that the mood in the room was really something. You know, we were a little apprehensive. We were in the administration building going through the security procedures, and we walked with an escort through the prison yard. The gate closed behind us. And we walked into the school building, and we started to catch that energy that we had felt that had been missing for a while. And then we walked through the door of classroom B104 to great acclaim from these guys who hadn't seen us in a long time. And all of the anxiety of the last 2 years melted away. It was really, really a moment. I wish you could have been there to see it. We have created a kind of living, learning community at the prison. We have asked the warden, and he has agreed, to have all of the students in our program transferred to the same living unit. So all of our guys live together now. So they learn together, they live together, they can talk together, they can study together. It's wonderful. And we're trying our hardest. We're never going to be able to completely reproduce the sort of residential liberal arts college experience in prison, but we want to come as close as possible to doing it. And this is an important step. And we've also launched our peer group formation program. And what the peer groups are is each man is assigned to a group of, I think, about 4 other students. And the teaching assistants from Western help them once a week process how their learning is going, how it's affecting them, how they're doing in the prison this week, what challenges are they experiencing, so they can learn to kind of lean on each other for their own progress. One of the themes we picked up when we went to the prison last week was the anxiety bordering on abject fear that some of these guys expressed about failing, not personally, but failing the program, failing their friends, failing the guys that they now start to see as the kind of tip of the spear. They are so committed to the progress of the group. It's really, really interesting. These peer groups are helping with that. Before we actually got into the prison, the peer group thing started before we could go back in, so we had to figure out how we were going to do it when we weren't going to be there. So we assigned students, incarcerated men, to be the peer group leaders. Said, you do it. You're majoring in faith, leadership, and service, time to have some leadership. And this was a comment that one of the peer group leaders told us about after facilitating a session. I'm just going to read it to you. He said, facilitating the group was inspiring. To be able to lead a group into dwelling in the Word and to establish which questions are going to be expounded upon was encouraging. What I learned about myself was that I can lead a group instead of always being in the background. Leadership is something that everyone should experience. We may have doubts, but at the same time, a bird must be pushed out of the mother's nest. These guys have remarkable ability to contextualize their learning in ways that, as much as I love them, my 18 to 22-year-old kids on campus can't do quite as easily because they just don't have the experience. These men have lived lives. Their average age is about 46. Most of them have children. Some have grandchildren. And there is, a certain life wisdom that comes with that, and they bring it to their learning in rather remarkable ways. The study hall was also run by the students before we could get in there. We have a once-a-week study hall on Friday afternoons, and I think this last Friday was the first time that David was able to go because we couldn't get in before then. So before that, we had students running it. Here's a comment that one of the study hall participants said. Not by design, but the room was abuzz with the receiving of the new book and the student guidebook and the returned assignments about Mr. Ives Christmas and the warmth of other suns. Each of us acknowledged a profound level of gratitude with the academic opportunity with the Hope Western Prison Education Program and detailed how this relates to our personal lives. Fantastic. So pleased with how these men are not just learning facts and not just trying to put them into a larger context for how they could be applied, but how you can see almost every time we go that they are becoming new creations. Well, what comes next? David and I have been working on this for almost 4 years. And, when you're working on something and you hope it comes to fruition, you don't think about actually too much about when it actually does come to fruition. And so finally the agreement was signed and the news, the balloon went up, and I said, well, David, we're like the dog that caught the car. Now we have to see what we're going to do with it. So we have a couple important steps coming up. In order for us to continue to be able to do this as we wish, the college's accreditor, it's called the Higher Learning Commission, has to approve the prison as a branch campus of Hope College. And so we have applied for this approval, and it has gone through the first level of review and gotten a good thumbs up. And now the final approval is scheduled to be decided just in the next few weeks. And so we're hoping very much by about November 1st or so to be able to say that Hope College exists in Holland, as it always has, and now in Muskegon. We have a full course schedule on tap for the spring semester. Isn't that interesting? We call it the spring semester. It's deep winter most of the time. We think about spring, we think, well, maybe April won't be so bad. But anyway, it's an optimistic label. So they're going to take their first mathematics class. And we have been honest with them, and we're honest with each other, and we're honest with the guy that we hired to teach their math class. We don't know how they're going to do in math. It's probably the area of their academic preparation that is kind of most unknown to us. And so I said to the guy that we hired, go in with about 2 weeks worth of lesson plans, and that's it. And then adjust after that and sort of see how they do. And I'm hopeful that they'll really do well. Then they're also going to take expository writing, and this will be helpful for them. They think well. The writing is still a little rough, and it needs cultivation and pruning and instruction. And this is really, really going to help them a lot. And then they're going to take their first Bible course, New Testament. And so they're going to be full-time college students, and they're going to be very, very busy. Now, a lot of people think, well, they're in prison. They've got all the time in the world, to study and learn and so forth. How hard can it be? And that's an understandable reaction. But prison is a very chaotic place. It's very chaotic. It's noisy. It's violent. I don't just mean violent like with physical violence. I mean one-on-one encounters are always kind of freighted with the anxiety that violence could happen. And when you've lived with this for years and decades, it takes a toll on your health. So it's not unusual for our guys to set their alarms and get up at 1 in the morning to do their reading, because that's when they can do it, and do it well, and do it with some degree of concentration. So a full course load for them is going to stretch them in ways they haven't been stretched in a long time. This winter, we will send out notices to the 32 or so thousand male prisoners in the state of Michigan, inviting them to apply for our second cohort, which will start next summer. We will be, they will need to have a high school diploma or a GED. They will need to be, have a good record of behavior in prison. There are certain violations that they can't have and still be eligible for our program. They have to be recommended by their warden or their chaplain or their school principal at whatever prison they're at. And then they're going to be writing essays for us on the nature of service, on what their reasons are for wanting to go to college. If you're in prison, there are good reasons to want to go to college, but there are also less good reasons, And as much as it breaks our heart, we don't want to take a person into our program just because it will move them closer to the West Michigan for their family to visit them. That's a really understandable motivation. But if you're going to be a successful college student, like they're going to have to be for 4 years, we need people who are totally sold out to that idea of being a college student. And then we will invite 20 students to join us. They'll be transferred to Muskegon, and perhaps for the very first time since they've been incarcerated, they will know what community is. Because prisoners are transferred all the time. It's not unusual if you're a person in prison to be in your cell and a guard comes and says, fill up a pillowcase with whatever you can, I'll be back in 5 minutes. 5 minutes comes, they get shackled, they put them on a van, and 6 hours later, they live in the Upper Peninsula. This happens all the time. Our guys are going to be able to stay in Muskegon for 4 years, and that stability is really, really good for them. We're going to be seeking federal Pell Grant funding to help us with our mission. Pell Grant funding is our federal dollars for low-income students, and for 30 years, prisoners have been ineligible to receive them. But, David talked about the idea that this program sort of spans the ideological gulf, I guess. And so the government approved reinstating Pell Grants for prisoners, and that will happen in July of 23. And if we can get Pell Grants for at least some of our prisoners, it'll really, really help. Because we have a rather significant fundraising load, and we should just be honest with that. You can see the numbers up there. That's our budget. That's what it costs to do this every year. We don't charge our traditional Hope College students anything to educate these guys. We don't think that's right. And so we raise the money. And God has provided marvelously in this regard. We're very, very thankful. David talked about the certificate that Western students will take. How can you become involved? Well, you can sign up for our newsletter. The way to do that is there are these sheets right here. They say Christ Memorial on top. Name, address, and email. If you would just put your name and for sure your email on there, we will make sure that you receive an electronic copy of our newsletter. And if you read it a couple times, decide it's not for you, you can always unsubscribe from it. But allow us to continue this conversation with you. I don't think you'll be disappointed. So please fill out the sheets on your tables. I've also have a number of copies of this brochure. There are more stories, facts, interesting little anecdotes in here. You can see photos of our students. Hopefully this will make it real. Take 2. Bring one home and give it away. Okay? Give it away. We're happy to print more. Tell your friends and family about us and about our students. And then, here we are in church. We're among people that we can confidently assert pray and have handed over their lives to something bigger. Pray for these guys, please. Keep them in your thoughts. They need it. They feel it. It's real for them in so many ways, and for us too. Let's see, what else do I want to say? I don't think anything else. You can see our website there and also our email address, and all that's in this brochure as well. Let me just finish with one thing before we take your questions. So when we went back last week for the very first time, we got in a big circle, and we asked the students. First of all, Pam taught them how to pray in sung Hebrew in about 5 minutes. She taught them how to do this, and I think they did great. I don't speak Hebrew, so I thought it sounded great. And they jumped right in. You'd think a group of 46-year-old men who have been in prison for decades, might feel a little hesitancy in standing up and singing in Hebrew with all these hand motions and stuff. And Pam had them doing it like they've been doing it forever. We went around the room and we asked them this question. How has COVID, the last 2 years, impacted your education and your learning and, how your spirit. And we heard so many great stories. One guy said, our assignments for HWPEP kept us alive during COVID. He said, the Hope Western Prison Education Program is like a purifying fire. I wrote that down. Another guy said, when we take students into this program, we give them what we call a starter pack. It's got a Bible, it's got a dictionary, it's got pens and pencils and notepads and a writing guide, and we give it to them in a clear backpack. Now, prisoners are not allowed to have backpacks, but the warden said we could give these guys clear backpacks so the guards could see through them and know what was in them and so forth, right? Well, when our guys walk around the prison yard with their backpacks on, they take a little bit of ribbing. They wouldn't call it ribbing, but that's what it is. Anyway, one guy said, when I have my clear backpack on and I'm walking around the yard, I feel like I'm carrying the Olympic torch. And with that, I'm just going to thank you for being here. I'd be happy to take any of your questions. Please.
This is one request to the speakers. You two have only 2 microphones. So would you just repeat the question or at least summarize? Thank you.
This is obviously patterned after the Calvin University Prison Initiative, and our granddaughter graduated from Calvin University this past spring, and at that ceremony, they had maybe it was the first graduates, but they had graduates.
Up on the screen.
On the screen.
Yes. Yeah.
And my question is, are those, that was based in the Handlin facility in Ionia?
Right.
And yours is in
Muskegon.
Muskegon? Are those the only 2
No.
facilities in Michigan where this is going on? And maybe you don't know, are other states,
Yes.
do other states have something similar to what is going on?
Sure. There are 9 other institutions in the state of Michigan that we're aware of that are either planning to offer a college program in a prison or have already started. I mentioned that Pell Grants used to be available to prisoners about 30 years ago, and then for a long time they haven't been, and now they're getting started up again. Well, back in the old days, when they were available, there were a lot of community colleges operating in prisons, offering degree programs in prisons, because they could use the federal government money to do it. And then when the federal money dried up, most of those programs went away. And now that it's starting to come back, there are more and more of those kinds of programs are starting up again too. We, for sure, have taken a lot of our lessons from our friends at Calvin. By the way, did you know that program is run by a Hope College graduate? Todd Chaffee, class of '88. I never fail to leave that out. They took their lead from what was happening down at the Louisiana State Penitentiary in Angola, Louisiana, which has been operating a bachelor's degree out of New Orleans Baptist Seminary for 30 years or so. So they copied them, we're copying Calvin, we're all making it sort of our own program in our own facility, because even though we're operating in one sort of big state bureaucracy, each prison is a little different, each warden is for sure a little different, and the environment's just a little bit different too. But we really long for the day when out in the Ray and Sue Smith Stadium on commencement day, we have the screen, and as our traditional students walk across the stage, we have the guys in Muskegon Correctional Facility their images up there walking across the stage up in Muskegon too. That's going to happen.
Let me just add one thing too, is right now we're on these monthly conference calls with people who are involved with the Michigan Department of Corrections, as well as people who are involved in either planning or actually running different kind of prison education programs. One of the things that I think we can be proud of as Michiganders is that the director of the Michigan Department of Corrections, as well as some of her staff, they say that they want Michigan to be the poster child for post-secondary education. And there's, even when we met, I remember meeting Heidi Washington, we went to Lansing, and I just wasn't sure what to expect with, prison directors and people. And, there's some good ones, there's some bad ones, but we have a lot of really good people in the Department of Corrections that want to make it more of a correctional system rather than simply a warehouse for people.
Yeah. Yes. Sure does. All of it. All of it.
Yeah,
It's all coming to Muskegon.
Rich and I were just talking last week on Friday with about 10 people and talking about the health dynamics course that we're going to teach. And it's like, well, okay, how do we do this? Mm-hmm. Usually when people are running around the yard, that's not a good thing in prisons. But,
My other question is the faith component. So is that integrated into all the classes? There's no pushback that this is a Christian?
That's a really, okay, so the question that has been raised here is, are there challenges to operating the Hope College liberal arts program in the context of the historic Christian faith in Muskegon, just like we're trying to do here in Holland? And the answer is no, it's really going just fine. We're very transparent with the state, we're very transparent with the applicants to our program, and we're very transparent to the students who get accepted to the program how we're going to operate this, okay? And so we expect them to learn, okay, at least sort of intellectually, gather what the Christian faith has to say. Now, whether they become believers is a job for the Holy Spirit, but and most of our guys at this point in this cohort, I don't know if it's always going to be this way, by the way, these guys come to us really ready for that. They're really ready. They're scripturally pretty sophisticated and theologically pretty thin. So, I can misquote the Bible and they'll correct me, but then when we try to go down a little deeper and say, well, what does this really mean? And how does this sort of apply and so forth? That's when we have really, really rich discussions. And then, it's everybody getting in. So it's good. Yeah.
I'd be a little bit more interested in your selection process for those that you accept into the program.
You want to describe it, David?
Yeah, as we move forward, our second cohort is going to be slightly different, and we've been working with the admissions department at Hope to come up with good forms for them to fill out. I mean, for us, we're most interested in the essays that they write. And you can tell a lot about somebody's, both their intellectual horsepower, as well as their heart and character, through the essays that they write. They're proctored essays. They have an hour, and we're asking them all sorts of different questions about their academic interest, as well as what they're hoping to get out of the program. And so we selected a lot of our students on five essays that they wrote that were proctored at this point. And so they'll have the traditional application forms that they have to fill out, but then also a number of essays that they'll have to take.
We give them a quote about service on one of these essays, and we say, what does service mean to you? And give us a couple of examples of when you have been of service since in your incarcerated life. And we look to see what they've done. Not what they say they will do, but what they've actually done. and we can screen pretty effectively people who are either ready for this or not ready for this.
Are people from the pilot program involved in the accredited program?
Yeah.
Yes, it's this, the same cohort that we got in. These guys are the trailblazers, right? They've done a lot of work, and we're grateful to them. And they've taken a lot of these pilot courses for not credit, and now they're starting their bachelor's degree. So yeah, our first cohort is the same guys, and then we'll get somebody else in. I wanted to say just a little bit more about your question about faith, because it's one that is. It's not an easy question to answer. And I really had a really wonderful conversation this last Friday with guys around this, because I'm teaching a course called Faith Seeking Understanding, which is a real introduction to what Christianity is all about. And there's 3 parts of it. There's believing, belonging, and behaving, and looking at these different aspects about what it means to be Christian. And, I said, we are here, so this is, a Hope College. It's from the perspective of Christian faith, but I also realize that not everyone in this classroom is a Christian, and there's some people who are wondering about Christianity, struggling with their faith. Other people are sold-out Christians. It's like, I want this to be a place where, I'm a Christian, and so I'm going to come at this, but I also want it to be hospitable to people who are in all sorts of different situations. One of our students self-identified as a Buddhist, and so it's a delicate balance. I mean, the same kind of delicate balance that happens on the Hope College campus. How can you present something from the perspective of Christian faith, invite people with their whole hearts to enter in, but also create space for people who aren't, who don't identify as a Christian as well. Yeah.
Yes.
I'd like to comment on color. Bill Brownson and I used to visit guys at Muskegon for quite a few years, and it hit me one day when I was looking at their uniform. I said, these uniforms are pretty unique, and I know you guys see them as something, as an underling, but I said, you're wearing royal colors. And it's interesting that they start out fresh, orange and blue colors.
Yeah.
But as they wash them, they tend to turn purple and gold. And I thought, those are the colors of heaven and royalty.
Wow.
And I started talking to guys. I said, do you realize you're wearing the color of royalty? He said, well, I never thought about that. I always thought of these as the ugly blues. But I just thought about the sovereignty of God. How somehow, in all of this, he's planning for these guys to wear royal colors.
I'm going to use that.
Yeah. Me too. Eldon. All right, Eldon, you're going to be the last question.
Oh, wow. I'm just curious about laboratories. Whether they have labs required for science?
Thanks for asking that question. The question was, do we have laboratories for science courses and so forth? It goes back to your question. How are we going to do this, wonderful Hope College curriculum in all of its amazing breadth in the sciences and the arts and the humanities and the social sciences, and how are you going to do that in the prison? Well, the humanities is pretty easy. The social sciences pretty easy. The arts, a little less easy, but doable. The natural sciences are a challenge for us, okay? And so we're in, because, we just can't bring chemicals into the prison or scalpels or, instruments. I mean, right now what we have is a sink and a countertop. And in back of the school building, a greenhouse that operates a horticulture program. And I bet there's a mulch pile in there somewhere, and there's a lot of science happening in a mulch pile. We're in conversations right now with a couple of geology professors about how to propose a science course to the warden so that his hair doesn't catch on fire, okay? And the other thing about this is most of us have a kind of vision, a mental picture of prisons as being grim and industrial and sort of dystopian kind of places. And they are. But this prison we're in has an interesting little feature in that it's got a yard, a prison yard, that is full of trees and this horticulture program, they got flower beds all over the place. And so there's a lot of biology happening in that prison yard that we think we can capitalize on. And we just have to figure out how to do it with the minimal number of threats to security as possible. That was a great question. It's a good one to end on. I again want to thank each of you, good people, for coming out and listening to what we have to say, for your interest in this and these men, for the way in which this can change them, change the environment that they're in, and change our whole state over time. And I finally would just encourage you, please leave your name and emails on those sign-up sheets. Take a couple brochures. God bless you all. Thank you.